Hey everyone, welcome back to the Profit from Legal podcast. I'm your host, Noel Bagwell, with another interview episode for you today. My guest today is Andy Beedle, host of the How I Make Money podcast and the founder of Brand Distillers, a high-end marketing company. I think you're really going to love what he has to say, so hang in there and we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Profit from Legal. I'm your host, Noel Bagwell, and I have a special guest today, Mr. Andy Beedle. He is the president of Brand Distillers. Andy has published several articles in the Wall Street Journal. He's also built and sold 3 businesses prior to leading Brand Distillers, and he's the host of the How I Make Money podcast, on which I was recently privileged to be a guest. So we wanted to have him on and pick his brain about some really interesting topics. Welcome to Profit from Legal, Andy.
Thanks for having me, Noel, and thanks for coming on our show. It was really great to talk with you and very eye-opening. Let me tell you that. It was great.
Thank you for saying so. I had a really good time, and we'd love to continue on this wonderful reciprocal relationship. But for the benefit of the audience, we have a lot of fun behind the scenes, but we want to do some stuff in front of the scenes for the audience and ask you some questions. So you generate leads that are pretty high-end leads for premium clients. So you do premium level marketing. Is that?
Sure. Yeah. Our sweet spot, we do lead gen. Our sweet spot has traditionally been for, really big ticket purchases, if you will. But, we've worked in higher education for a very long time. I got my start there. I was a professor for 10 years. So we've done recruiting, which is really just lead generation for colleges and universities all over the country. We do lead generation in the real estate space, both for land acquisition and residential. And we've done we've done financial services, medical. We do home improvement, all that kind of stuff. And it seems like our sweet spot is definitely bigger ticket items where there's kind of a sales process. How you end up gravitating into something like that, I couldn't tell you. But part of it kind of dovetails with your world. A lot of those markets are very heavily regulated. So in the financial services world, we're always, looking at FINRA. In the education world, it's going to be the FERPA, Family Educational Right to Privacy Act, as well as we work with some for-profit educational entities. So they have a different regulatory structure than nonprofits, and on and on. I mean, the game. And we tend to have specialized in those. So we're able to get work done that gets through compliance checks very, very rapidly and very, very easily. And somehow we have fallen into that as our sweet spot for most of our private clients.
That's just really interesting. I guess my main first question for you, it's good to have a background on what you do so everyone kind of knows, what your proficiency is and what your specialty is. But my main first question for you is, why is prioritizing premium lead generation essential for small to medium business owners and decision makers?
Yeah, it's an interesting, there are a lot of different ways to market, and small businesses really break down into 2 categories in our world. There's what we would call business to business, B2B businesses, and business to consumer, B2C businesses. The B2B world is very relationship intensive, and generating leads in that world is really less important than offering a lot of value at the beginning of a relationship and then building that over time. And certainly we have done work in that. We're not a sales company, and that's a very sales oriented process, right? So we tend to work with businesses that are business to consumer. And what's important about lead gen for those folks is, as we build our business, and you said something on our podcast that I really, really liked and have actually repeated to several people, when you say, unless there are 3 folks in the business, the visionary, the handler, and the money guy, you don't really feel comfortable working with them. And when we come to a business, a lot of times they'll say, oh, revenue, we need to grow this, that, and the other. And we look at that and we say, hey, unless you've got a very clear idea of how much your product and service costs to service and how you're going to sell people once you generate leads, we don't really want to work with you unless you've got that in play. or we'll have a consulting engagement to help you structure stuff long before we start lead generation. And
Kind of like going on to Shark Tank and the shark saying, well, you have to know your numbers. You can't come
right.
in here and not know your numbers. And any kind of work you're doing with a vendor, a supplier of services, someone in that B2B space who they're running a business too. It's not just a consumer. They expect you to know your numbers. They expect
Right.
you to know what you're doing and what's required to make everything happen end to end. If they have to do guesswork with you, a lot of people will just nope out of that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's the beauty of our approach, and I think it's something that you definitely share, because you guys do some extremely innovative legal work, is taking that approach and knowing what the important benchmarks, call them KPIs, call them whatever you want, are, and focusing, I mean, not to be kind of overly OCD, but focusing fairly relentlessly on it, in that, we are always, as in multiple times a day, sometimes looking at what is the cost per lead, what is the ratio of leads to purchases, right? So, how's that? So then what's our cost per purchase and all of that kind of stuff, and breaking that down. And we find a lot of times that, especially when you're generating leads in different channels. So for example, we've got a client right now, we just shipped them this morning. We've got new TV ads coming online for them in the Austin, Texas market. We've got billboards up for them in the Austin, Texas market. We've got newspaper. We've got Facebook. Right. So you've got all these channels, and every one of them contributes to the bottom line, but you need to understand how they fit in. And you do that by knowing your numbers.
Absolutely. Well, would you say that not knowing your numbers is the biggest mistake that people tend to make when they're trying to attract premium prospects or work with a marketing person who's going to help them do that? And if not, what would you say the biggest mistake you tend to see is?
Yeah, I think the biggest, there are two big mistakes that kind of fight with each other for first place. And one is not knowing your numbers, because then you make decisions that are just not based in fact at all. And then you also have what we call leakage through your sales pipeline, because you drop entire sources, or your status as you go through a CRM or something like that. All those status things aren't being done uniformly by your sales team, so you lose good leads. So it's that. And then the second one is an inability to tell your prospects what you do simply, clearly, and I mean, call it the elevator pitch, call it what you want. That's like going to Shark Tank and they go, what do you do? And it takes you 9 minutes to tell them, right? So those two things, I think, really vie for first place in most common, nearly fatal mistakes we see in our small business clients.
Messaging is really hard. And I think that a lot of the problem comes from the fact that in small businesses, small to medium businesses, but especially small businesses and micro businesses, you have this distinction between strategists and technicians, between working in your business and working on your business, between focusing on what you do and the business of what you do. And most small businesses are really good at one or the other, or the leaders in those small businesses are really good at one or the other. And their messaging tends to orient itself around one or the other. But to have a really great pitch, you really need to understand, clarity on who you are, what you do, establish some authority, what are your results? Who have you done business with? Draw clear lines in the mind of the person you're talking to between what it is you do and why they should believe you. And then you have to talk about the problems that you're solving in the world, your solution to them, the heart of why you do what you do, just sort of the why of everything, and then walk them through a clear call to action, a clear, like, here's the opportunity, here are the next steps, right? And then leave them with this essential feeling of, okay, this is the right person to work with. And people don't follow any kind of formula. They don't get their pitch right. Like, they don't really hit all of those essential elements of the pitch. And so it comes out just like, well, I work on cars, or, I, generate leads for people. And they don't talk about, well, who are your customers? Like, what have you done for them? And so there's a lot of ambiguity, and people just are not comfortable with that level of ambiguity very often. What we do for people, and I think probably what you do a lot as well, like a common thread between your industry and my industry, is adding clarity and precision. For
Oh
me,
yeah.
it's adding clarity and precision to the relationship itself, to the incentives that people are responding to the parameters of those relationships, the limits, and what you can and what you can't do. And for you, it's clarity, I would say, in terms of like the message. What that like that old Janet Jackson song. What have you done for me lately?
Right.
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 What can
Yep.
they do for you, and what have they done for you lately? And if you can
Oh
hit those
yeah.
two notes with really great marketing, you can really create some dynamite content. Would you agree with
Well,
all of that, or
I,
you have
I
anything else
I
to add?
do, and I think something that drives that lack of clarity on the part of leaders in a business is twofold. One is, to be honest with you, it's fear, and that fear is driven by and maybe I'll back up a little bit. Anybody listening who's interested in marketing, I will now save you thousands and thousands and many thousands of dollars with the following. When someone comes to us and we engage with them, the first thing we do is we say, hey, I need you to boil down what you do into a sentence in the following structure. We help X do Y through Z, or you can say, we help X avoid Y through Z. And many, many times, and God love them, people will say, sorry, we're both from the South. Bless their hearts. Let's go with that. Many times what people will say is, oh, what we do is really complicated. And you got to say,
You just lost the other person. As soon as you say
exactly,
that, you just
exactly,
lost them. It's like, well, I don't have time for complicated. No,
yep.
simplify it for me then.
And the old adage, right? A confused mind says no, right? And
Yep.
so I think and again, in what you guys do in the law debate, in the law kind of portion of people's business, the regulatory compliance and kind of that kind of stuff. Again, clarity internally in a business is huge. If you can say to outward facing people, we do X, we help X do Y through Z, and then you turn around and tell that to your people, your team, and they know that, now the ability to kind of stray outside of that gets somewhat curtailed. You know what issues you need to prepare for internally. You know how to talk to people externally. Everybody is on the same page. And it really has a massive effect on how any business appears and relates to clients in the marketplace.
So what are the two ways that you present alternatives to these mistakes? What are, like, you've got two big mistakes.
Yep.
What are your primary alternatives to those that you tend to focus on with Brand Distillers?
Yeah. When somebody comes to us for and few people come to us and say, "Oh, I need lead generation," right? What they'll really say is, "I need to grow in this market, or I need to grow in this area, or we're introducing a new product, or we're in trouble and we need help," whatever.
Right.
And obviously that first thing we say, "Okay, what do your numbers look like now?" And we get a lot of embarrassed, "Oh, gee golly, I don't know." So our first order of business then is to help people understand what the major metrics are. And again, you would think in marketing, which is a very data-driven business in the modern world, there would be a just passionate understanding and knowledge on the part of business leaders of what these numbers are. But as you've discovered, when you guys bring this innovative legal service to market and say, "Hey, we're going to have a fixed fee and we're going to give you legal KPIs," right? People kind of, their minds are blown. And they go, "What?"
That?
Yeah.
What's a legal KPI? What's a key performance indicator?
Exactly. So we come in and we say, "Okay, I need to know, what's your ad spend? What are the channels? How many leads did you generate? How did you score those leads? What was the price?" And on and on and on. And if clients don't have it, which is fine, we set it up for them, right? Same deal. We come in and we go, "Okay, well, here's a system." And there are a number of different systems you can use. We adapt to fit what a client's internal sales team is doing, right? So we will put that system in place and say, "Hey, good news, bad news. The good news is you got a system. That means you have knowledge, and knowledge is power. The bad news is we're going to get prepared to waste half of your advertising budget for the next 3 months while we figure out what's going on, because you just can't know without knowing the numbers."
Right, and it's never a waste to do the research, but you have to test in order to, at least that's what I found with marketing, is that you have to spend a certain amount of time that you're not guaranteed to get any like reliable ROI on doing some marketing and branding efforts. You have to sharpen your marketing against the stone of the market. And if you're not sharpening your message against the stone of the market, then you have no idea you have no idea what's going to work, what's not going to work, what's going to test well. You have to do all the A/B testing and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does feel, I guess, a lot from a client's perspective like a waste. They don't want to pay you to do the research. They want you to know what works right away.
Right.
And that's not always possible to know what's going to play well in the market or, how to get traction. But once you have something that is testing well, that is getting engagement, then, you can really amplify that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's always a game of, spaghetti test it. I think at least that's the way it feels with marketing. And with legal, I guess there's this old saying that, good lawyers know the law and great lawyers know the judge. And
I like that.
That drives me crazy because I hate the good old boy impression of the law. And that's not the way that things are supposed to be. But even the law is a people business. And for us, there's this impression that they answer, no matter what the question is that you ask a lawyer, the answer is going to be, well, it depends.
Right.
And that's true to a certain point. It does depend. But I think people want to know when they come to us, kind of like they want to know what marketing messages are going to work when they come to you. They come to us saying, well, if I do X, what's the result versus if I do Y? Like, give me a forecast, give me a prediction. And what I tell them is, if I'm involved early and often in your business, if we're able to provide preventive, proactive, ongoing legal support to your business, those kinds of forecasts that you're going to want are going to be a lot more accurate. Right. But if you call me in at the 11th hour after the excrement has already hit the fan, then the forecasting can be a lot more difficult to do. So you really, I think when it comes to things like marketing, when it comes to things like the law, getting those data points early and often and doing them, as you say, consistently, going back to those KPIs, hitting those numbers, sometimes on a multiple times per day basis, but like really getting deep into the data points and measuring your metrics on a regular, consistent fashion is really the only way to get the results that you want long term.
Yeah. Well, and we do, we manage a gigantic amount of ad spend every year. Not relative to, Ogilvy or people who are doing Super Bowl ads, but for our small business clients, it represents a huge investment. And one of the things that we look at as a business for us internally every year is we go, what was our average return on ad spend for our client base according to vertical? So we've been at about 850 to 890% return on ad spend as an average for our clients, for the last, I don't know, however many years. That tends to be about where we hover based on the verticals that we're in. But that number is very important because they come to you and they go, okay, if we're going to do advertising in this way, what's going to happen if we're going to do it in this way? And for example, I go to customers, I go, hey, we should have billboards. And they go, oh, great. Are we going to get a lot of calls? I go, no, we're not. But what is going to happen is the cost of our Facebook ads is going to go way down because Facebook on average, right? People need to see an ad 22 times before they act on it. And if I have a billboard, I'm going to get 190,000 impressions a week in a mid-sized market. And that counts because it's my target area and they see it and so on and so forth. So if you don't know your numbers, it's very hard to know how your different marketing activities combine together to create an effective sales program that's got what we call a positive return on ad spend.
What a great insight, because it's really about advertising ecosystem. It's not about one ad or one strategy. It's about using multiple strategies that all have synergy and work together and amplify each other, right?
And that's exactly it. In the law, and it's one reason I was excited to come on this show, because so much of what we do has such a high regulatory component. Yeah. Even with stuff like the DNC list, do not call list, right?
Yeah.
And all of that. And so what happens is when you get partners in an organization, so you've got a compliance team, you've got a marketing team, and all this, and everybody is focused on particular numbers in their specialty, it enables all of us to come together and say, for example, a legal team says, hey, I would like to add a checkbox to a form with the following language.
Yeah. And
we will say, is it possible for us instead to have that be a link, right? Mm-hmm. And we will all do that with reasons, right? Because so legal says, hey, I actually need these 45 words in the state of California because of their right to privacy laws, et cetera, et cetera. We go, okay, well, here's what I can tell you. This is how it's going to impact cost to lead. And now we're having a leadership discussion that says, okay, well, everything is a risk. All of life is a risk and risk management. What'll we do to manage our risk appropriately? So now, because we're focused on KPIs, I've got compliance, I've got marketing, I've got leadership, I've got sales, all in a room having a very productive rather than antagonistic discussion.
That's the way it's
moving the
supposed to
business
work.
forward. Yeah.
That, ladies and gentlemen, that last 2 minutes right there is solid freaking gold. That's the way decisions are supposed to be made in a business. That's the way it's supposed to work. And you know what? I would say 90% of small businesses, that's not the way it actually works.
Right.
It usually works with one decision maker or a couple decision makers in a room independently going and polling or getting, feedback from these isolated service providers or teams that don't talk to each other, that don't have the crosstalk, that don't have the feedback, that aren't connected, whatever. And it's not everybody making the decision together collectively and sourcing the wisdom of the crowd. Instead, you've got all of these decision bottlenecks and one person trying to use their judgment to evaluate all these different things. And that's why people ultimately get confused, and the confused mind says no, and stuff doesn't happen, and things don't progress the way that you want them to progress. If you want them to progress towards your goals, you have to align all of these services with your enterprise goals, remove the bottlenecks, let people talk to each other, let marketing talk to legal, and let legal and marketing talk to accounting, and realize that nobody's going to make a decision without you. You're not going to be left out of the loop. Nobody wants that, because ultimately the client is the boss and they're paying all the vendors and suppliers.
Yep.
But, the decisions and the recommendations need to flow in an open space, an open environment where everybody can talk to everybody. And you can all make the decisions. You can at least provide the advice together. And then the final decision comes always from the client.
Absolutely. And to my mind, what I like about a sort of relentless focus on, call it the numbers, however you want to do it, is not that it takes the human element out of things, but quite the contrary. If I'm sitting in a room and I've got the compliance division and legal counsel there and accounting and sales and so on and so forth, and we're all trying to address a problem, regardless of what it is, when you as a representative of your unit have numbers that you're managing to, right? Those are always on your name card, right? I'm Andy Beedle, and I'm here to get the absolute highest revenue return on your ad spend. Noel's here to have to have legal actions for the year be 0, right? I mean, we're all managing to a number. And that way, when we have a discussion about how and why to do something, it's not personalities engaged. It's, okay, well, how do we balance all of these different methodologies of helping a department or a function within a business succeed? And that way we're collaborating and we're not arguing, right? And that's something
it's
I
a
really
team
value.
sport.
Yeah.
It's a team sport. Business success is a team sport. And no one would look at baseball or football or basketball and say, ignore the statistics.
Right.
It's not about the statistics. I mean, if you've ever watched Moneyball,
oh yeah,
the whole thing's about the statistics, right? The whole business of the sport and the sport itself thrives on statistics. It thrives on the numbers. It thrives on the metrics. And business is a team sport. If you're out there playing 1-on-5, or 1-on-9, or I don't know how many are on. How many people are on the average football team?
I don't know
the defensive team, the offensive team. I don't know what the number is, but it would be 1-on-many, and they're all bigger than you, right? So that's scary.
Yeah, a lot, a lot bigger than you.
It's a terrible idea to ignore the statistics in any event. I mean, you don't want to be one on however many other people are on the other team. You want to have your team and their team and everybody competing pretty much equally. That's the only way it really feels fair and feels like you can compete. And when it is one-on-many in business, it's easy to get beat down, overwhelmed, to lose your motivation, lose your passion, burn out. Your mindset's just shattered because you feel completely outclassed at every turn. The only way to combat that really, and to preserve your mindset and your motivation for the long haul to get through entrepreneurship, is to play it as a team sport and have all these people on your team. And for them to do that effectively, you've got to manage the metrics. You've got to be aware of the metrics, know what they are, know your numbers. So,
100%.
last little thing. This has been just so insightful. But what do you recommend if if they don't know their pitch cold, if they don't know their elevator pitch cold, if they don't know their metrics, before they reach out to someone like you or someone like me, what would you say would be some really great first directionally correct steps that they could take, like a book to read or a course to engage with? Like, what would you say is the first step or two to take to head in the right direction before they reach out to a pro that can really help move their business downfield?
Sure. Yeah. And that's a really good question. And I think, every client comes to us at a different stage in the life of their organization. So there are a lot of ways to tackle that problem. If you're just getting started, we actually have a course on growing a side hustle into a business that is going to launch here in a few weeks. And we started that. We don't generally do that kind of stuff, but we had so many people because of the pandemic call, hey, I'm thinking I heard from this guy to talk to you. So we'll just distill all that. And rather than go down a rabbit hole of a lot of books and whatnot, I really encourage clients to do two things. One, literally write down on a piece of paper, we help X do Y through Z. And as soon as you can get that on one line of paper on a standard legal sheet, you're done. And until you do, you're not done. And then the second thing we encourage them to do, if they're not able to do that easily, is to step back from their business and ask themselves, what is their business's MVP, we call it, minimum viable product? And what we mean by that is if you stripped everything away, what is the thing that you could sell to somebody right now that's very simple, you would know how to explain it to them, and you would know what to charge them? So that's
Great.
kind
Those
of
are really great suggestions. Well, we're coming up on time, but in the last 35 seconds or so, tell us how people can connect with you and how they can get the most out of that initial interaction.
Absolutely. So we're on social media, but the best place is to just go to branddistillers.com, BRANDDISTILLERS.com, and take a look at the bottom of the page for the How I Make Money podcast. You've been a guest, so your people should all come over and listen to that episode. And that's really a great way to connect with us. We're on social media. We answer questions there for free all the time. We have a private Facebook group that anyone can join called Distill Your Brand on Facebook. Look for us there.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.